The Tennessee Titans open offensive coordinator spot comes down to Brian Daboll or bust. And I'll tell you why on today's edition of Locked On Titans.
You are Locked On Titans, your daily Tennessee Titans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Locked On Titans podcast. I am your host, Tyler Rowland. Titans fans, today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. On today's show, we'll talk about a recent report that makes me believe it's Brian Daboll or bust for the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator position. We'll also talk about some people who could follow Robert Saleh over from San Francisco and why I do not want that to include Brandon Aiyuk. And Jeffery Simmons eviscerated Brian Callahan on a recent podcast, and I think it makes the Robert Saleh hire look even better. Before we dive in, do want to thank you for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, Tennessee Titans content all year round, always for free. Make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Titans podcast. Speaking of every day, shout out to my everydayers out there tuning in Monday through Friday. Couldn't do it without you guys. If you aren't an everydayer, you need to be one. We're going to get more news on the Titans coaching staff over the next few weeks. We got to talk roster moves, free agency, the draft. So much to discuss. Make sure that you stay locked in with the Locked On Titans podcast and join the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club as well. I'll tell you more about that later in the show. But again, I think it's Brian Daboll or bust for the Tennessee Titans at this point. He is the only offensive coordinator option still left on the market who I think would be a slam dunk for the Titans and was in my top tier of offensive coordinator candidates. And the reality is, part of that is because Brian Daboll is so good, but the other part is the other two options that I would like for the Titans offensive coordinator spot simply aren't going to be available. And that starts with Mike McDaniel. We all were dreaming about the dynamic duo of Robert Saleh and Mike McDaniel, but McDaniel, of course, about an hour and a half after I released the podcast yesterday, talking about Mike McDaniel for 8 straight minutes, decided to go be the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Chargers. And look, how can you blame him? Justin Herbert was the best quarterback available of all the offensive coordinator spots. Los Angeles is a nice place to live. Mike McDaniel is a guy who likes it out west from his time with the San Francisco 49ers. So I can't really blame Mike McDaniel for that. But reports did indicate that if he didn't take that, he definitely was interested in the Tennessee Titans job. And also, Kliff Kingsbury reports indicating on Wednesday that he's probably going to go be an offensive coordinator for a young head coach, whether it's a Joe Brady who may get hired in Buffalo, which is very important to the Titans at this point, what happens in Buffalo, or with a guy like Davis Webb, who is the offensive coordinator for the Broncos, who's getting a lot of looks. Kliff Kingsbury is not going to be coming to Tennessee. So the only other top tier option that I had on my candidate list was Brian Daboll. And we got a great report from Diana Rossini on Wednesday that said Brian Daboll is going to be the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator if he does not get the head coaching job with the Buffalo Bills. And at this point, I feel pretty confident that Brian Daboll is going to be the Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator. I have been honest with you guys, or as Cam Ward likes to say, I've kept it a buck with you guys all the time on, hey, I like this guy, but I don't think that the Titans are actually going to get a chance at him. I said that with Harbaugh. I said that with Stefanski. I said that with Hafley as well. And I said it with Mike McDaniel. I said, yeah, I would love Mike McDaniel. He's my number one option. But I don't really think that's what he's going to pick. But this time, with Brian Daboll, I'm ready to get hurt again. I do believe that Brian Daboll is going to be the offensive coordinator for the Tennessee Titans. And again, he is the only top-tier option left. And with how important the offensive coordinator hire is for Robert Saleh, I will be honest, my excitement for the season and excitement for the Robert Saleh era will go down a little bit if Brian Daboll is not able to be the offensive coordinator for the Titans. And again, the decision for Daboll right now is Tennessee Titans offensive coordinator or Buffalo Bills head coach. And if I'm honest with you, Why in the world would Brian Daboll want to go to Buffalo after what happened on Wednesday? If you guys did not see the press conference with the Buffalo Bills general manager and the Buffalo Bills owner, it was a disgrace. They absolutely lied. The owner from the Buffalo Bills absolutely took a crap on Sean McDermott and lied to everyone right in their face and said that Keon Coleman, the bust wide receiver from the Buffalo Bills, was the choice of the coaching staff, and the general manager didn't even want him. He was just being a team player. But then, after that interview, a bunch of quotes and videos start coming out of the Buffalo Bills general manager, Brandon Beane, literally saying, I knew going to sleep that night that Keon Coleman was going to be ours the next day. If we didn't get blown away with a stupid offer, we were getting Keon Coleman. The owner literally lied. So if you're Brian Daboll, you're probably only going to get 2 chances to be a head coach in the NFL. That's typically how it goes. Are you going to go back to Buffalo, where the owner is a certified loon and just destroyed the previous coach and lied to the people and blame the coach for a bad draft pick that the general manager had, when the roster has been the failure in Buffalo? And in my opinion, the roster was a bigger problem than the coaching with Sean McDermott. They have no wide receivers. They have never gotten an elite pass rusher. Brandon Beane literally got his job as the general manager because Sean McDermott vouched for him based on their time in Carolina and then snaked him out of a job in a power struggle later on. You want to be a head coach and go into that environment? I simply don't think that that makes a lot of sense. And from the Buffalo Bills perspective, if you're mad at Sean McDermott because you can't get over the hump, why would you hire Brian Daboll, who just failed in the New York Giants situation as a head coach and was a part of the teams that you couldn't get over the hump with as an offensive coordinator? Why does that make sense? It doesn't make sense at all. So in my opinion, I think that there is a great chance that Brian Daboll is going to be the offensive coordinator for the Titans. And one other thing that really has me excited about that is Brian Daboll is picking the Tennessee Titans over the Philadelphia Eagles, who have the most expensive offense in the NFL, a super talented offensive group. But Brian Daboll wants to come to Tennessee and work with Cam Ward. Remember last year, the Giants would have sold their soul to the devil to come up and get Cam Ward. Remember that video of Joe Shane, which I hate the way his name is spelled. Makes no sense to me. It should be Shone. But Joe Shane, the general manager of the Giants, calling saying, hey, I just wanted to check one more time and make sure. And Mike Borgonzi's like, no, we're going to take Cam Ward. The Giants would have moved heaven and earth if they could to get Cam Ward, which means that Brian Daboll was in love with Cam Ward. Now, I talked about how Brian Daboll's previous experience lends to running quarterbacks. He worked with Jackson Dart, got the best out of him, got a playoff win out of Daniel Jones, turned Josh Allen into an MVP candidate and one of the best players in the NFL. So all of those guys have running ability, but Brian Daboll also coached with Alabama when they won the national championship in 2018, and he made Tua look like a top 5 first-round draft pick and then got Jalen Hurts to play very well in the title game. And as we go along, Jalen Hurts looks worse and worse. And it's clear that Jalen Hurts needs an elite offensive mind to make him look like a viable quarterback. So all of those examples of quarterback development have me very excited about what Brian Daboll can be for the Tennessee Titans. 7 times he's had a top 10 run game in the NFL as an offensive coordinator or a head coach. 3 of them were top 5. And what helps a young quarterback better than the run game? And if you look at the schematic trends in the NFL, the run game is more important than ever with the way that defenses are playing 2 high safeties, playing nickel defense, trying to limit explosive pass plays. Being able to run the football is critical. And again, Brian Daboll has been excellent with his run offenses. He is a specialist in quarterback development. And let me say this, Brian Daboll is a little bit of a jerk. I mentioned it before when we talked about him as a head coaching candidate. He's a little bit of a grumpy guy. He'll get in your face. He'll be angry. He's a hard butt, to put it politely for our audience out there. I know a lot of you guys listen with your kids and stuff like that. Don't worry, I'm never gonna break that trust with you guys, all right? But my point is, he's got a little dust on the bottle, and I think That's perfect for Cam Ward. Cam needs to clean up some of his mechanics, man. Cam needs to be a little more locked in on some of his throws and make sure that he is going with his mechanics all the time. And I think that Brian Daboll is the guy who can drive Cam Ward to that greatness and be hard on Cam Ward. And we're going to talk about what Jeffery Simmons had to say about Brian Callahan later in the show. And my God, did Jeffery Simmons take the blowtorch to Brian Callahan. But one of the big things he was saying is Callahan didn't coach us hard enough. Good players, great players want to be coached hard. And sometimes that creates uncomfortable situations. Sometimes that creates tension. But that is the type of stuff that creates greatness. Pressure makes diamonds. I don't want a sissified coach who wants to be the best friend. I want somebody who will jump into the room and say, that throw sucked. Look at your feet. Look at your mechanics. What is that? That is unacceptable. It's not good enough. That's what Cam Ward needs to go to the next level and be the player that we need him to be. So I would absolutely love Brian Daboll. And again, Kliff Kingsbury is not coming. Mike McDaniel got hired by the Chargers. It's Brian Daboll or bust for me to be at max excitement for the Robert Saleh coaching staff this year. But with all that being said, who is going to follow Robert Saleh over from San Francisco? It's going to be harder than it would typically be because Kyle Shanahan is Captain Petty. But I can tell you one guy who I certainly don't want to come over from San Francisco, and it's Brandon Aiyuk. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Robinhood. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not just you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in the moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action, so when the momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but never had a dynamic way to apply that knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by people. You're no longer just a spectator. Play by play, you decide. Trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Futures and cleared swaps trading involves significant risk and is not appropriate for everyone. Event contracts are offered by Robinhood Derivatives, LLC, a registered futures commission merchant and swap firm. Today's episode is also brought to you by Game Time. The NFL playoffs are in full swing, and there's nothing better than being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans. Watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with logins, and prices jumping right at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to fans. It's a hack for unlocking amazing NFL tickets and experiences in just a few taps. I buy all my tickets on Game Time. I'm serious. NFL, NBA, WNBA, MLB, comedy, concerts. I bought it all on Game Time because they have the best features in the industry. A panoramic view from your seat, zone deals, all in prices, so you know what you're going to pay. Also, it's all backed by the Game Time guarantee. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDON NFL, Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. Titans fans, let's continue today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. We talked about why it's Brian Daboll or bust for the Tennessee Titans, but I have a feeling it's just going to be Brian Daboll. Now, I want to talk about some guys who could follow Robert Saleh over from San Francisco to help fill out his coaching staff, why it's going to be kind of difficult, but I want to start with a player, not a coach, because I've got a lot of you guys reaching out to me, a lot of conversation about Brandon Aiyuk and him potentially coming over to the Titans. I absolutely hate that idea. Now, before I tell you, I got something awesome that I got to tell you guys about. You got to join the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club. Hit the link down in the description. Tough to say that 3 times fast. LockedOnTitans.supercast.com. You're going to get access to a Locked On Titans Discord server where you can talk with me, a ton of other Locked On Titans fans. I'm going to give you immediate reaction when things happen, tell you about breaking news before the show ever drops, give you access to content way early. Also, you're going to get the opportunity to hear the podcast ad-free on whatever podcast app you already use. You get discounts to Locked On Titans merch. It's a great opportunity, only $5 a month. And when you use the promo code SALEH, S-A-L-E-H, you're going to get your first month free. But with that being said, I have zero interest in Brandon Aiyuk. None. Absolutely none whatsoever. I don't care if it's a trade, if he's cut. Doesn't matter. I do not want Brandon Aiyuk anywhere near this team. It is obvious that Brandon Aiyuk got his contract and quit on his football team. And the reason this is all popping up is because John Lynch, the San Francisco 49ers general manager, had his year-end press conference on Wednesday and said Brandon Aiyuk has played his last snaps for the San Francisco 49ers. They are just outright saying he will not be back on this football team. And for things to go the way that they've gone this year with Brandon Aiyuk and the 49ers are one of the most respected franchises in the NFL. I believe that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch do a fantastic job running that franchise. This isn't like Aiyuk had a problem with the Jets or the Browns or the Cardinals or something like that. No, this is the San Francisco 49ers. You know, it's like George Pickens is a good example to break the trend that I'm talking about, but like the Steelers. When has anybody left the Steelers in a terrible way and went on to do good other than Pickens? Whether it's not Plaxico Burress, he did pretty well in New York, but Antonio Brown, Martavius Bryant, Chase Claypool, Le'Veon Bell. Like, if you don't work with the San Francisco 49ers and Kyle Shanahan, you're not going to work anywhere. And a trade? You want me to give up draft picks for a guy who just missed the entire season with a devastating injury, quit on his team after he got a paycheck? Not a chance. It's not only about giving up capital for that kind of player. It's about what that would say to the locker room. You cannot put Brandon Aiyuk's selfishness into this young locker room of the Titans. That is the opposite of what the Tennessee Titans need to do. And Robert Saleh was in San Francisco last year. I had somebody say to me, well, maybe Robert Saleh can get the best out of him. Well, that didn't happen last year, and Robert Saleh was in San Francisco, so I am so totally out on Brandon Aiyuk. And again, not only a trade, as a free agent. Even if they cut him and the Titans can sign him on a 1-year deal for $10 million, whatever, I'm not interested. The Titans need to go out and find their own Brandon Aiyuk, who's a better person in the locker room, a more reliable player. You can find great wide receivers anywhere in the draft. Like, we see good wide receivers all the time be picked anywhere in the draft. Puka was a 5th. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a 4th. A.J. Brown was a 2nd-round pick, guys. Justin Jefferson went like 21. Wide receiver isn't one of these things where you need to take that kind of risk. The Titans are not in a position to do that. So out of all the people who could follow Robert Saleh from San Francisco, I am so out on Brandon Aiyuk. Now, looking at the coaching staff. Again, normally when you hire a coach like this, there is an influx of guys who that new coach brings over from his old coaching staff. So it would be logical that Robert Saleh would bring over some people from San Francisco. But here is the reality. Kyle Shanahan is a petty, odd dude. All right? Kyle Shanahan is not going to allow Robert Saleh to take away a bunch of his assistants. And one thing that you have to keep in mind is a lot of the assistants that were in San Francisco were there before Robert Saleh came back. Remember, Saleh went to the Jets and then came back to be the DC. It's not like Saleh came back to San Francisco and brought a bunch of dudes back with him. No, a lot of these guys stayed in San Francisco and will stay in San Francisco because they don't want to do what happened with Robert Saleh in New York. They don't want to go with Saleh to a lesser franchise than the San Francisco 49ers, lose their jobs after 2 years, and then have to come crawling back and hope that they get another job in San Francisco when they could just stay in San Francisco and be loyal to Kyle Shanahan. So, a lot of people are looking at Chris Kucherek, the defensive line coach for San Francisco. I would love to bring him over to be the defensive coordinator of the Tennessee Titans. And in theory, Kyle Shanahan could not block that move because it is a promotion. He's being promoted from defensive line coach to a defensive coordinator spot. Shanahan couldn't block that. But Kucherek has said no before. He has said, I'm good. I'm going to stay. It's not about being blocked. I don't want to go. So I would love Kucherek to be the DC for Robert Saleh. They have a great connection. He's a great D-line coach. He knows the defense that Robert Saleh runs. He can teach it well to the players. It would be perfect. But I don't know that he's going to come. But, again, he is a D-line coach. So Shanahan could not block that. But, Gus Bradley, who was an acolyte from Seattle and Pete Carroll's Legion of Boom defense, he's been tied to Robert Saleh quite a lot and gave Saleh a few jobs in the past. Gus Bradley is currently the assistant head coach of the defense. That's his official title. The Titans probably can't bring him over and make him the defensive coordinator unless they offer him a pure assistant head coach role. You can't just make him the defensive coordinator. That is not a promotion from assistant head coach of the defense. Okay? So Gus Bradley might be another guy that's difficult to get over, but the Titans might be able to wiggle around that with that additional title. And we've seen things like that happen before. Okay? We've seen the Titans have to get creative with their titles, and that's all up to the NFL office. It's not like there are written out rules that say, if he does this, if you give him this title, you can interview him. Like, you got to submit this stuff to the NFL league office and let them say whether it's a valid promotion or not based on the job title and description. But on the offensive side of the ball, that could give the Titans a potential wiggle room with Klay Kubiak, who is currently the offensive coordinator of the San Francisco 49ers. And I talked about Mike LaFleur, who is the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets with Robert Saleh in his first 2 years. He's currently the offensive coordinator of the Los Angeles Rams. Technically, if the Titans bring them over as offensive coordinator, that's not a promotion. Kyle Shanahan can block that. Sean McVay can block that. And Kyle Shanahan has said, I will block that. I'm not losing Klay Kubiak. He does call plays here. Just not all of them. But if the Titans were to say, Klay Kubiak is the assistant head coach, maybe assistant head coach and offensive coordinator is enough for the NFL league office to say, yes, that is a promotion, and Kyle Shanahan, you can't block that. I think that absolutely could happen, and that would be a way for the Titans to get around it. But a lot of these guys, like I said, are loyal to Shanahan, not Robert Saleh. They might not even want to do that, even if the league allows it. So that goes back to my point at the beginning of the show of Brian Daboll or bust. Because my next couple of guys, Mike LaFleur, Klay Kubiak, probably aren't even going to be allowed to come over to the Titans. Now, Bobby Slowick, Arthur Smith would be kind of my next options there. Adam Stenavich from Green Bay. But even Stenavich is the offensive coordinator for the Packers. That's not a promotion, even though he would get to call plays. That legally is not. So the Titans, no matter what, if they want LaFleur, Kubiak, or Stenavich, they're going to have to get creative and hope those guys are willing to leave to call plays, which makes it a little more difficult, which reinforces the Brian Daboll or bust. Okay? Now, there is one guy who I want to mention, who I'm very interested in, and I am convinced that he is going to come over to the Titans, and I think it's awesome. And it's KJ Wright, the former linebacker for the Seattle Seahawks. He's currently a defensive quality control coach for the San Francisco 49ers. He is not a linebacker coach. He is not a defensive coordinator. He's a defensive quality control coach, which means that if the Titans offer him the linebacker job If the Titans offer him defensive coordinator, he can take it. Now, I don't think that KJ Wright is ready to be a defensive coordinator who is essentially a teacher for Robert Saleh in the meeting room. I don't think that he's ready for that job. He's too young. But bringing him over as a linebacker coach, I think that would be excellent. And then Saleh can continue to train him. And then eventually KJ Wright, when the Titans defense is so freaking good that their defensive coordinator gets hired somewhere else, KJ Wright will be ready and step up into that role. So I'm looking at Gus Bradley, Chris Kusarek, KJ Wright, Clay Kubiak, and I got to tell you, I just don't have a lot of optimism that a ton of 49er guys are going to get pulled over by the Titans. There will be a couple, I think, but I don't think it's going to be anybody of significance when they do, because at the end of the day, Shanahan is just a petty dude, and those guys are loyal to him as well. But speaking of coaching and everything, man, Jeffery Simmons did a recent interview where he got real about Brian Callahan and why things didn't work out, and it just makes me so happy that the Titans got a guy like Robert Saleh. Do want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Indeed. Have you ever hired someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit? Like Brian Callahan, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's episode is also brought to you by TurboTax. Tax season doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out your forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction possible. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Titans fans, let's cap off today's edition of the Locked On Titans podcast. Talked about Brian Daboll or bust, why Kyle Shanahan's pettiness is going to make it harder on Robert Saleh. Now I want to talk about this Jeffery Simmons interview where he outright killed Brian Callahan. It didn't feel malicious, but Simmons was just simply telling the truth. Before I dive in, I do want to thank you again for making Locked On Titans your first listen each and every day. And speaking of every day, you gotta join the Everydayer Club, LockedOnTitans.supercast.com. It's $5 a month. Literally, the show is free all year round. I give you Monday through Friday content all year round, always for free. You could support me and support the show for $5 a month. That's the price of a cup of coffee. And use the promo code SALEH, 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 for your first month free. I'm already in there chopping it up with a bunch of you guys. It's going to be so much fun. Me, you get the show ad-free in your podcast app as well. Access the Locked On Titans merch. Make sure that you go to LockedOnTitans.supercast.com or just hit the link down below in the description. Very excited about the Locked On Titans Everydayer Club. But with that being said, Big Jeff went on the Bussin' with the Boys podcast with Taylor Lewan and Will Compton. Look, I'm not a big fan of Bussin' with the Boys. I like informational podcasts where I learn things. I don't just want to be entertained by fun stories and stuff, but this is an absolute must watch. Jeffery Simmons gets so honest, so real, and one of the big things that he talked about was Brian Callahan. And he made it very clear in the interview, Callahan was just too soft. He was just too soft of a guy. Did not push the team hard enough, did not have a high enough standard, did not hold guys accountable, let a bunch of stuff slip through the cracks, and that's why the Titans so desperately needed leadership. That's why Borgonzi has been preaching about leadership. That's why Jeffery Simmons said at the end of the season, no matter who they hire as a coach, he's got to come in here and lead, because Brian Callahan was not a leader. And you're probably not shocked by that. I'm not shocked by that. I thought it was pretty obvious that Brian Callahan wasn't a leader and wasn't a stern enough guy to lead an NFL locker room. He's too nice, wants to be your buddy. Listen, in reality, leadership requires a little bit of jerkiness. You got to have a little piss and vinegar to you to be a leader, because leadership is going to require uncomfortable situations, tense conversations, reality checks for people. Being a leader requires you to have a little bit of a spine, and Callahan just simply did not have the backbone to be an NFL head coach. And Jeffery Simmons gave examples. He said, and a lot of it is comparing to Mike Vrabel. A lot of the conversation is Mike Vrabel did this and Brian Callahan did not. And one of them was Brian Callahan didn't always require people to have notebooks at the meetings and take notes and remember stuff. Jeffery Simmons remembered when he was a rookie, he had to take a notebook to every single meeting. And Jeffery Simmons even said he would write down the keys to victory for not only the defense, but the offense and the special teams. Because Mike Vrabel would literally quiz you on everything. You could be the 87th man on the roster, and Mike Vrabel would ask you what the key to victory for a preseason game for the offense was. Do you know? Were you paying attention? Did you take those notes? That sort of focus, that sort of alertness, that on edge. Jeffery Simmons said it. I didn't want to look like a fool. Mike Vrabel would make you look like an idiot if you weren't prepared and you weren't locked in. Brian Callahan did not hold the Titans to that same standard. Jeffery Simmons even said there were times where we'd say, why do you guys got a notebook? I'm not saying anything you got to write down. What? What? Just insane. Also, Jeffery Simmons pointed out that basically every single Monday, Mike Vrabel would kill guys with the film. What are you doing? You guys have heard the story where he said to Taylor Lewan, what the heck are we paying you $85 million for, Taylor? What was that? Vrabel would destroy these guys in the film. And Jeff said there were some days Callahan didn't even make them watch the film on a Monday. They just didn't do it. And when they did, Callahan wasn't, he said that Callahan would be like, hey, this play, these are why we lost. But wouldn't really drill guys. And I'm sorry, maybe it's, self-fulfilling, because I'm a little bit of a jerk myself. I can admit it. All right? But in my opinion, I'm a good leader. And it requires that. And Callahan just didn't have it. One of the big things, too, is Jeffery Simmons said that when Mike Vrabel was the coach, he led the film sessions for Film Friday. So right before the game, on the Friday day of practice, Vrabel would lead the entire team in the film watching. Offense, defense, special teams. Mike Vrabel up there coaching the team. You know who did Film Friday? Bones. And Simmons even said, this is no disrespect to Bones Fossil. Bones is a great guy. He said, I think Bones could be a head coach. But you got your special teams coordinator up there doing Film Friday. And Simmons even said, yeah, I'm in the front row. I'm a team captain. I know what's expected. He said, me and Amani Hooker would sit next to each other and just be like, why is the special teams coordinator doing Film Friday instead of the head coach? What are we doing? And Simmons even made a point, and I personally think that he's talking about either Marcus Harris or Kevin Winston. But he said there was a rookie defensive back that would sit in the back of the classroom? And do you think that he's locked into the film and the keys to victory when it's the special teams coordinator doing the film? And he did say, which is no surprise, the only guy that would really hold the guys accountable and drive them hard was Denard Wilson. And that's no shock because Wilson would call these dudes out. That's why I keep saying Denard Wilson will not be back with the Titans, but Denard Wilson was a good football coach, and I think he's going to be a good defensive coordinator going forward. Denard Wilson actually held these guys to a standard. Brian Callahan did not. So it's no surprise to anybody, I'm sure, but I cannot believe that it was as bad as it was. And I thought Jeff, again, it didn't seem ill-willed. Like Jeff wasn't trying to be mean to Callahan, but he was just being honest about why it didn't work. And he even said one of the stories that was the most damning to me. He said that he didn't mention the game, but I know what game it was because I know what I'm talking about. I know this team better than any person on earth. I know the Tennessee Titans better than anyone on earth, and I believe that. He said that Tony Pollard had a rough season, and Tony Pollard had a pretty good game on the ground. The Titans lost the game. It was a close loss, but they lost. And Mike McCoy came into the locker room congratulating the O-line and congratulating Tony Pollard. And Jeffery Simmons said he thought to himself, we didn't even run for 100 yards, and we lost the game. And the coach is in the locker room congratulating guys. What kind of standard is that? And it was the Chargers game, guaranteed. The Titans ran for 87 yards. They lost by 7 points. Tony Pollard had a pretty decent game. But that right there is, I told you, Grandpa McCoy, it's just like parenting. You take your kids to the grandparents' house, they'll let them eat candy for dinner. Your father ain't going to let you eat candy for dinner. That's why I thought it was laughable when people would get in the comments and say, well, what about bringing Mike McCoy back? I'm sorry, you need to hit the books if you had that thought in your mind at any point in time that the Titans should hire Mike McCoy going forward. Could you not see that he is an old man with no piss and vinegar at all who was just trying to keep everybody hunky-dory? He was a camp counselor. Like, what are we doing, you know? Also, though, outside of that stuff, Jeffery Simmons got very personal about his lack of a relationship with his biological father, about what his mother meant to him, about how he is trying to go through therapy and trying to work through his emotions, about whether he should try to bridge the gap with his father who's still alive and how he should handle that. Guys, that is real life human stuff that a lot of people can relate to. Complex relationships with your parents, feelings of abandonment, the natural hate and resentment you have in your heart for your parents when things go like that. For Jeffery Simmons to be as vulnerable, as open and honest, I woke up on Wednesday morning after watching the interview and I bought Jeffery Simmons' jersey. He deserves it. What a guy, what a player, what an all-time legendary Titan. Make sure, and there are funny stories in there too, guys, about him and Taylor Lewan beefing in the locker room and stuff. Make sure that you go check that interview out. It's a must-watch for Titans fans. But that's going to do it for me today, folks. As always, I am your host, Tyler Rowland, and this was Locked On Titans.